Hello and welcome to another episode of With Enough Prep Time. I'm your host, the Nerd Man, and today we're talking about this Woody Allen documentary. I was waiting for, as I've been made into a kind of jury member, by this documentary, to listen to the prosecution's side, essentially, which is this documentary. This documentary is, purely the prosecution side. That is Allen versus Farrow, I believe it's called. So, Mia versus Woody, pardon me, even, the documentary is called. So I wanted to start off because I have a ton to say about this documentary, and one of the questions that the accuser, Dylan Farrow, asks in this is, what is your favorite Woody Allen movie? And I thought it was a really interesting question, especially to somebody who is a Woody Allen fan. I'm also a big Mia Farrow fan, so I'm a huge fan of her work, both as an actress, but also as somebody who works within charity, and she's basically done a huge amount of work in the field of of charitable work. So I'm a huge fan of her in terms of that. So yeah, I wanted to go through this documentary and talk about what we learned, but not in the sense of, I'm not here to, I'll put it this way. I think the third episode makes a very, very compelling case, but that's not what I'm here to deal with. I'm here to deal with my overall kind of view on the documentary and what it's doing, and whether any documentary should be allowed to do what it's done here. So I wrote this just to start off with. So, dear HBO, what is your favorite Woody Allen movie? And it was in reference to the question that Dylan Farrow asks the viewer, who, you can assume maybe some of them are Woody Allen fans. And eventually the documentary, we get to the crux of what this documentary is trying to achieve. And I think it's an incredible piece of subtle manipulation that is really, really interesting from the point of view of the ethics of doing such a documentary in the first place. So I'm going to play you a little bit here.
An article in the Hollywood Reporter about how I wouldn't watch any more new Woody Allen films. I had to turn off all my notifications. I've never gotten so much hate mail. I just tried to be offline for a while after I wrote this. I haven't seen a new Woody Allen film since, and I probably won't until he's dead.
Of course, I feel I can just say, I shouldn't have done.
I think what they did took a lot of bravery in and of itself, and it's really helped me to reclaim some of my own sense of self-worth. And every message of support that I've received has been a gift.
So here we go. all through this documentary, I had this very, very queasy feeling that I was watching not only just an incredibly biased piece of documentary filmmaking that takes no effort to even potentially see things from the other side, but even skews things that and reinterprets things that are unfortunate, but nonetheless don't rest on something that one can blame Woody Allen for. And then you have this little piece here right at the end of the film in which basically it's advocating with a whole 4-part documentary that, I'm not going to lie, has some compelling parts which do suggest that Dylan Farrow definitely has a case that should have been taken to court, and she should have, not just the prosecution can present their case, that the defense can present their case, and also that in the defense presenting their case, that these witnesses that claim that they were there and saw things, that they could be cross-examined and really by a defense attorney, and that Woody Allen could stand up and go on the stand and make a case for whether he himself is put his case forward, put his side of the events forward. This is ridiculous. So just to make you understand what this documentary has all been. So this documentary is basically a documentary telling you why that even though, and I'm gonna give the documentary the benefit of the doubt in this before I go into some other things, that even though Woody Allen, was never brought to trial, and even though the prosecution claimed that they did have, a case, that the case rested on Dylan Farrow's testimony, and that Dylan Farrow couldn't, because she was a child and they were afraid of her being re-traumatized, wouldn't be able to get on the stand and tell her story because she kept going silent when the prosecution, the DA or one of the prosecutors, pardon me, was asking her questions about what happened to her. She kept going silent, and therefore he took that as meaning that she was so traumatized by these events that had supposedly happened to her, or allegedly happened to her, that he was worried about putting her on the stand, that she wouldn't be able to deal with it. So her and Mia Farrow and the prosecutor decided to drop the case. They decided to not go forward with the case that they say was incredibly strong, therefore robbing Woody Allen of the opportunity to actually defend himself. Now, years later, deciding that an accusation is enough to mar Woody Allen's name and put his name in with a number of different other cases that have come up recently, such as Harvey Weinstein, Jeffrey Epstein, who are proven and convicted, sexual abusers, and not only proven and convicted, but serial sex abusers, or sexual abusers, because various women have come forward, testifying to their sexual abuse and have consistent stories. This, on the other hand, is the case of one individual in the entirety of Woody Allen's life, claiming that he molested her at a very, very odd and suspicious time that really strains credibility, even if you want to give her the benefit of the doubt and say, all right, well, maybe he was just being extra devious and decided to commit this act at this particular juncture so as to cover his tracks, because he could say, oh, why would I do it at this time, right? When he's obviously gone off and run off with Mia Farrow's daughter, and then to come on a family visit to visit his actual children. He then, he then decides at this point to molest Dylan Farrow. Maybe that was a really devious plan by him because he knew that that would be an unbelievable story. That is plausible, or it would take a lot of foresight. But yeah, maybe he did it at that particular point because he thought he could get away with it. But the other side of that story is it's actually just a really unbelievable story that he would do this. And the fact that nobody else has come forward since to say that he's done anything means that, unfortunately, if he did do this, and I don't blame Dylan for this or Maya, because I can understand why they're angry at him. But unfortunately, if he did do this, then you had your opportunity to take him to court, to legally try him, and you missed that opportunity, and now you regret missing that opportunity. And so you've made this scandalous documentary, 4-part documentary, and then you came right to the crux of what you really, really wanted. You didn't even have the humility and self-restraint to actually not expose the real reason you made this documentary. This isn't about justice. This isn't about telling your truth, having your side of the events heard. This is about ending his career. You've said over the past 2 weeks, several celebrities have voiced their opinion and come out and said they'll never work with Woody Allen again. And every single one of those voices that come out and say that makes you happy. It makes you feel better about yourself. It alleviates your pain. Essentially giving the message that anybody who works with Woody Allen, thank you, or chooses not to work with Woody Allen again, thank you. You're helping me out. You're helping out a sexual abuse survivor by doing that. That's very, very worrying. So all you need to do is be accused, and then you can come on, make this huge documentary, and finally, give your, say, tell them what you want, just come out and say, I want to just end this man's career, even though there's no evidence, he hasn't been tried, he hasn't been convicted. So, but just because I have the power to, because I have friends in high places, friends at HBO Max, friends who will, and family who will make a 4-part documentary series, uncovering presenting this case in a very, very one-sided manner over 4 episodes. I have friends in high places that can do that. So I'm going to end this man's career. So, okay, fine. I'm not going to, as I said, the 3rd part was very compelling. And if true, any of that was true, I think Woody Allen should have been brought to trial. And if, the evidence really was significant, then he should have been convicted. And I could make the decision, I will never indeed watch his films again. But that isn't what happened. He wasn't. And I know it's unfortunate. She was a little girl, and maybe she would have been traumatized by a big media spectacle drama of a court case. But that was the prosecution and her and Mia's decision. So he wasn't convicted. He hasn't done anything since. So he ultimately you can't really say anything. You can't expect us as either consumers or the artists who are out there claiming, you know, some heroic deed by abandoning Woody Allen, that they're just going along with a narrative that essentially, you know, undermines the basic foundation and principles of our legal system, which is that one is innocent until proven guilty. I find that highly problematic. So let's go on to, I wanted to discuss something that was sent to me by one of the people who watches my channel. And I thought it was very interesting. An interesting discussion of, you know, the case, you know, for the defense's side. So I wanted to read some of it and go over my thoughts on that in relation to what I learned in the documentary. So this one is in particular the one that I was interested in because it was saying, you know, as a documentary, this person who wrote this was a documentary filmmaker themselves, and he said to look out for the tricks of the trade of the documentary. Now, I haven't read a lot of it. I've only read one paragraph, so I'm going to be reacting to this with you. So I am myself a documentary filmmaker, so I know the tricks. Sorry. I'm myself a documentary filmmaker, so I know the tricks and the trade. I know the how easy it is to create the illusion that you are being objective while absolutely manipulating your audience to accept a specific agenda. Frankly, every time you decide where to place your camera or what part of a photo to zoom in on, you are imposing a point of view on your audience. I'm not saying this is wrong. In fact, it's virtually unavoidable. It's not something I worry much about since my documentaries have been rather non-controversial artistic profiles. But if you're trying to sway an audience, there are devices at your disposal that the average audience will never be consciously thinking about. I recently posted a trailer on YouTube for my upcoming documentary, and numerous people told me how they cried at the end. I always chuckled to myself because I knew it was simply the music that coaxed their tears, right? But for films on a controversial subjects, there are subtle ways to make it look like you're asking an audience what they think when you're actually telling them what to think. As a viewer, think yourself as a juror at a trial. Anybody can sway an audience by presenting one side of a case. But could you, as a juror, render a fair verdict by only hearing from the prosecution and not the defense? And this is what's been happening in this documentary. Of course not. Not only would you need to hear testimony from both sides, but each of those witnesses have to be cross-examined to give you the full picture. And that's where these filmmakers will likely fail you. It's not a question of what they include, it's a matter of what they leave out. For all the years Mia Dillon and Ronan Farrow have been having their say on mainstream and have had their say on mainstream and social media, I've never seen them put in a position where they weren't in control over who was questioning them. So I've never seen them have to hold up under cross, so to speak. Now in this documentary, there might be some very soft cross questions to make it look like the interviewers are going for the truth. But these will likely be questions where the responses are already known, creating the illusion of due diligence. And if the answer doesn't suit the filmmaker's needs, it can always be left out on the cutting room floor. I know several people who could question these three Farrows, plus DA Frank Marco, reporters Maureen Orth and Andy Theobald, and others, that in 5 minutes would turn each of them into the Kane mutiny. So I can't vouch for specifics, but this image we was just sent to me, showing me an email detailed 2013 from producer Amy Hurdy, asking someone to participate in a film which would be called The Hunting Ground, about sexual crimes on college campuses, from the same filmmakers behind the Woody Allen series. To encourage their participation, Hurdy clarifies, "We do not operate the same way as journalists. There would be no insensitive questions or the need to get the perpetrator's side. I give them credit for not claiming to be journalists, but also point out that they apparently make no distinction between perpetrators and alleged perpetrators. They alone decide who are the perpetrators, who are the victims, and then go on to act as judge, jury, and executioner. One-stop shopping." This Hunting Ground movie I've already discussed. Something I'm going to discuss later is the issue of race, which is hugely problematic in this documentary, as well as their former documentaries, specifically against young Black males or Black celebrities. Ask yourself why Ronan Farrow blocks anyone who ever questions his statements on Twitter, no matter how polite or well-informed they are. This is the same Ronan Farrow who wrote an editorial for The Hollywood Reporter asking why Woody Allen isn't asked the hard questions. Why did Ronan Farrow never respond to my tweets offering a $100,000 donation to the charity of their choice for a shred of evidence of any number of his provably false claims? When Ronan and I were both invited to debate the issue live on stage at the Soho Forum in NYC, I responded, "Fly me out and put me up and I'm there." Ronan declined to even respond. Ronan is a lawyer and a Pulitzer Prize winner for investigating reporting. I won a prize as most outstanding student from the Rotary Club when I was in 8th grade. So what is he afraid of? He knows I could effectively rebut every single statement that comes out of his mouth on this matter, but pair him with a friendly interviewer who doesn't cross-examine and remains Mia's blue-eyed golden child. If Ronan were to try this case or testify in a court of law under oath, I assure you, he would be sweating like Rudy Giuliani, right? So again, he says, I won't relitigate here any of the specific points I've made in my past writing, but it's worth repeating that Dylan Farrow could still take Allen to civil court in Connecticut and sue him for every penny he's got. The statute of limitation won't expire until Dylan turns 48. Ronan could even be her lawyer, but we'll never see this happen because their case would evaporate quicker than Trump lawsuits claiming election fraud. Their charges make good, juicy copy, but in court of law, they have nothing. Just ask yourself why the Farrows keep trying their case in the media and in the court of public opinion rather than the court of law. Now, this is a really, really interesting point here that I'm going to look up to make sure about the statute of limitation, because I'm not going to just take this person's word for it in Connecticut. But one of the things that struck me about this documentary was this Ronan Farrow, Ronan Farrow as the personality that he's become. And he himself admits in this documentary that he really doesn't know anything about the case, and that he actually avoided for a very, very long time even dealing with the matter of this case. Now, I wrote here because I had to look at some notes. So I'll go over this because it's so just of my feelings on the documentary itself, right? And I'm gonna go over it and then as I said again, I don't want to retry this case in the court of public opinion. That's, I don't know the facts of the case. This is none of my business, really. Okay. I'm just responding to a documentary that offends my sensibilities, mainly because of the impact that this has on the legal system in terms of the power that this gives accusers and the power that this gives prosecutions to destroy people's lives, which they already do routinely and aren't brought up. When they wrongly convict people, send people to jail without enough evidence, when they doctor evidence, don't share certain evidence with the defense, so in order to, blackball their defendants and defense teams. And judges do nothing. They don't get brought up on criminal charges later. Nothing happens to these prosecutioners. And what a prosecutioner hates more than anything, which I've noticed, is a client, a defendant who has the means to actually stand up to the state. They really, really hate that. And they paint those people as somehow perverting the law, when in fact, what people like Woody Allen and Michael Jackson actually have in common is that they're getting the kind of legal representation that everybody in the world deserves, that every defendant deserves, if you are to suggest that someone is innocent until proven guilty. The law is weighted as such for those without means. And this is what cases like the Woody Allen thing shows. For cases for people without means, it's weighted so you are actually guilty until proven innocent. And you are still guilty until proven innocent, even if you're somebody like Woody Allen. And I can assure you, if the same accusations were made against somebody without means, who ran off with their wives or their girlfriend's daughter, who wasn't their child or wasn't, and ran off with their daughter, and then went on a visitation with, in the presence of social workers, and the youngest daughter claimed that he sexually molested her, when there's no shred of evidence of that. That person, I can assure you, would be in prison now, because nobody, it would be taken to court, and nobody would believe somebody who, essentially would be said, oh, he groomed this daughter, when there's no evidence of that either. Now, I'm not saying I like Woody Allen or think he's a great guy or a great person. I admit I'm a fan of his movies, but that's nothing to do with this. I'm looking at the case in and of itself and what this documentary has told me. And as powerful as this documentary is, there is no smoking gun in this documentary to suggest that Dylan Farrow couldn't have come up with this story. In fact, there's still really a very, very compelling case that she may have done so. And, the part 3 was the most compelling one, where they would put psychologists on the, to talk about certain videos that Dylan Farrow did, where she was saying, what happened to her. And there was one particular video which was extremely compelling, in which Dylan Farrow basically was, being questioned by Mia Farrow as to what happened to her. And she said, no, that didn't happen. I wasn't naked, right? I had my trousers on. He put his hands under my trousers. And they said that if she was being coached and going along with a story, that she would not, she would just go along with what her mother says, as opposed to saying no, and correcting what her mother was asking her. However, what the documentary doesn't say is that there's lots and lots more video. So, their point is that this video that was taken of Dylan, right, was analyzed and examined extensively by New York and Connecticut courts, Connecticut social workers and medical experts. And both came to the conclusion that there was nothing there, and that in fact, possibly Mia had coached her to say this, right? But this documentary shows select videos of Dylan Farrow where the story is most consistent, but it doesn't show us all of the videos that were taken by Mia Farrow, which we know from her own admission in the documentary are a lot. She questioned Dylan a lot. So did the prosecution. So did the social workers and psychiatrists. All of these people questioned Dylan Farrow a lot. So if they said that her story was inconsistent and that she seemed like she was coached, you can't just take one single clip, the one single, 30-second clip out of the volumes of evidence that they had to look at and say, oh, because of this, you can get some psychologists to look at this 30-second clip and say, oh, actually here, I think she was telling the truth. That's not, you can't bring that to a court. You'd be laughed out of court if you tried to do that. If somebody had a good defense lawyer, that you're going to take this one single clip where, yeah, she's a bit more authoritative, but we haven't seen all the rest of the clips. Where are all the rest of the recordings of Dylan Farrow? How convincing was she then? And I've got to be honest, Mia Farrow is much more convincing than Dylan Farrow in this documentary. When I see Dylan Farrow speak about her abuse, I've got to be really, really honest about this. Anyway, let me read what some impressions I had about this. So the first thing I brought up that, stood up for me is, they can't bring up one other person who Woody has molested in all these years. And so the documentary, this documentary that covers, the acrimonious split between Hollywood titans Mia Farrow and Woody Allen paints an at times compelling case for Woody Allen's guilt. I don't deny that. Yet the lingering feeling is left after all this that while they've proved Woody has a ferocious PR team, which I believe that Woody Allen has been able to, secure a PR team that has put forward stories that make him look innocent, just like Dylan Farrow and Mia Farrow have been able to use friends of theirs who work at the New York Times, who work in the biggest newspapers in the world, to put forward facts and a narrative that make Woody Allen look guilty. So, as I said, that equally, Ronan Farrow has just as powerful, if not a more powerful, media engine to create the narrative of Woody Allen's guilt. After all, ask the average person on the street. So I'm asking you this: if you ask the average person on the street about this case who hasn't researched it, and they mostly will repeat the oft-heard rumor that Woody married his daughter and is a sexual predator. So it seems like the powerful spin against Woody Allen is much greater, to the average person than the spin that Woody Allen himself has tried to put out. So the film, from the standpoint of the mechanics, from its mechanics, is it kind of artfully mimics almost the style of Woody Allen's romantic comedies, but instead of replacing it, instead of the kind of cozy feeling that you usually get with the Woody Allen movies, you get a suffocating and queasy feeling, so that it associates, very, very closely the aesthetics of Woody Allen films, and the message of Woody Allen films with this supposed sexual abuse. So you know, to go onto Twitter, and this is my biggest problem with the situation, to go onto Twitter rather than through the legal system to seek justice is vindictive. It's not brave. You know, now I don't blame Mia Farrow specifically for this. Human beings don't always have to be brave. You know, many a time when we suffer great injustices, that bring out in us mean and vengeful spirits. And I'm not saying that that is what's happened with Mia, but I'm saying that given what Woody Allen did to her, she has every right to be furious with him. And I reject many of the accusations made against Mia as being as baseless as the ones against Woody. I want to see the evidence. And if you don't have evidence and you didn't take her to court, then, you know, like, for instance, Moses Farrow claims that Mia Farrow abused him as a child. He's the adopted child of Mia Farrow. If he has a case and he has witnesses and he has evidence, go to court, take her to civil court, say she was an abusive mother and you want to sue her. She's caused you, you know, psychological damage. I don't know the statute of limitations would have passed for that either. So going on Twitter, I'm not saying, you know, both sides of this family, this incredibly dysfunctional family, are using and abusing the media in order to portray each other as villains, when in fact this should all be going through the criminal justice system and shouldn't impact my appreciation of Mia Farrow's work as an artist, nor should it impact my appreciation of Woody Allen's work as an artist either. I enjoy both their work and I'm going to continue watching it. So so Vengeful Spirits one, that given the nature of the crime that was suffered at the hands of a tormentor might be well deserved. So in the documentary, when she says she has to hold her own against ridiculous odds, so this is one thing that Dylan Farrow said in the documentary that really blew my mind. She says that she wants to be the voice of, you know, a number of women who have been abused by powerful men, who have to hold their own against ridiculous odds. But what are those ridiculous odds that she speaks of? One can't help but feel what she means by that is having to prove a defendant guilty in court, in a court of law, by an impartial jury of their peers. That's what she's saying is the ridiculous odds that she had to face, because she had her opportunity. I know she was a child and it was very difficult for her, but she had her opportunity to take Woody Allen to court. She still has an opportunity, according to this writer, which I'm going to look this up, to take Woody Allen to court. And she's decided not to, of her own volition. So is that the ridiculous odds? So you want it to be easy. You want to be able to go on Twitter and just end his career. That's the odds that you think would be fair in our society. So let me make this straight. I understand if she's an actual victim of these crimes, she has every right to feel like that. She really does. But we as a society have to absolutely reject in uncertain terms this appeal by alleged victims to skew the criminal justice system towards favoring the prosecution, towards favoring making things easier for them to manipulate evidence and facts so that they can try and retry people in a court under their own, under a situation that favors them and prejudices against defendants. So she's basically saying the presumption of innocence is ridiculous odds that she had to overcome. The presumption that an individual is innocent until proven guilty in a court of law. Now, as I said, I understand from a victim's point of view why they may feel this. But again, we as a society can't accept that. We must reject it in absolute terms, most especially for those without means, where the balance is already tipped massively in the prosecution's favor. Essentially, if Woody Allen was wealthy, and in fact, Woody Allen wasn't wealthy and in fact innocent of this crime, the likelihood is right now he would be in jail. The documentary clearly tries to gloss over the fact that the case was dropped because Dylan was silent in the interviews, and therefore they did not want to put her on the stand in case they re-traumatize her. Well, that's great for the prosecutor. So you let a potential pedophile go without trial, so he could go and be free to harm other little girls. That's why you have to tell Dylan Farrow as a young girl, as a little girl, why it's so important that she testify. And you have to appeal to the courts to make the situation as easy as possible for her. Defense lawyers know already that it is bad to badger a little girl on the jury stand, so they don't do it. They know it makes them look bad and it makes their client look bad if they badger little girls on the jury stand, right? So they take it very, very easy on little girls who are claiming sexual abuse. That's defense lawyers, I mean. And if they don't, they suffer the wrath of the jury, who really dislike them for for badgering them when it comes to cross-examination. So already this is a bullshit argument about re-traumatizing her for being on the stand. All you are doing is letting a potential pedophile, which is Woody Allen, go about his business and go on and harm other little girls. Fortunately, it seems that he hasn't harmed any other little girl. No little girl has come forward. Nobody has come forward. So really, there is no case. If he did do this, and I'm sorry, it is possible. And as I said, the documentary at times makes a compelling case that it's possible. But we can never know as a society, because you failed to do your job and to bring this man to trial. And you continue to do so because you won't even bring him to a civil court. So it doesn't make any sense. Add to that, none of Mia's clan have ever taken a polygraph test, but Allen has taken a polygraph test about this case and passed. The documentary provides no follow-up questions, no questions to Mia about what happened to her children, who many of whom have tragically died. Now, again, I say this, I believe Mia is entitled to the same presumption of innocence that Woody Allen is. And if any of her children, whether it be Sunyi or whether it be Moses Farrow, believe that she is guilty of criminal behavior to them when they were young, then they need to take her to court. It's important to add my story to theirs, Dylan Farrow says at one point. Fine, but the media must be so she says this at one point, that she felt that it was important to add her story to the stories of other Me Too victims. And I say, fine, but the media must be balanced against an unconvicted man. They must be. Whenever they report on this case, they must be fair to Woody Allen in the sense that he hasn't been convicted. Retrial by Twitter is not an option. After you or a prosecution decide to drop your case for personal reasons. Such is possibly the case with Mia and Dylan Farrow. She claims she suffered for a long time in silence. We are willing to use the alleged, so here's the thing about this documentary as well. So they are willing to use the alleged abuse of brown and black people in order to protect the famous celebrity white man, right? So what I mean by that is that Sunyi claims abuse. Moses Farrow claims abuse, right? And there are people on the side of Woody Allen, right, who absolutely use them to shield Woody Allen himself. And that's another problem. So if Moses was in fact abused, why are we using that? And Sunyi was abused. Why are we using that to protect Woody Allen? I have a problem with that as well. Yet, do we even really care about the potential suffering of Moses Farrow and Sunyi beyond our need, and I'm talking about this in terms of Woody Allen fans, beyond our need to vindicate our suspicions against Mia's motivations so we can sit down and watch Woody Allen movies in good conscience? So I wrote that as a part of a counter to not what the documentary is saying, but what we as or people who are Woody Allen fans do when they use Sunyi and they use Moses Farrow to bolster their case against Mia Farrow. We're ultimately doing the same thing that this documentary is doing, that the media is doing, where we're obfuscating what is important, which is the abuse of these children and investigating the alleged abuse of either of these children, whether it be Sunyi and Moses Farrow. We don't use that as a shield for Woody Allen, and just like we don't use because again, what are we doing? We're just protecting a white man, but using the abuse of brown people to do so. Just like this documentary itself is shielding, any kind of sense of an ability to defend oneself. Basically, in this documentary. So this is a harrowing story full of people, I don't much like, who have tons of power and the ability to use the media as a machine to bring down people that they don't like, men that they have an invested interest in bringing down, men they have no idea if they are guilty or not. And that's what I say about Ronan Farrow. By his own biased admission in the documentary, Ronan Farrow took years to go over the evidence as if he was ever going to come to any other conclusion but that Woody was guilty. He then claims 20 years after the event, he combed through evidence and decided by his own authority that his estranged father was guilty, and that therefore he and his sister could use his powerful friends in the media and the New York Times to post slanderous and salacious accusations about a man being a child molester, showing only the prosecution side with none of the defense. Witnesses who claim to have seen things not being seen things in the household and seen Woody supposedly acting inappropriately with Dylan Farrow were never put on a witness stand. They were never cross-examined. We have no idea what their agenda might be or not be. A projection. This is able to project and insinuate. This is a projection that Ronan is using that allows him to insinuate he has a case while not showing any proof or evidence regarding the statements that this documentary and he himself is making about his father. So let me take you to another part of the documentary now, which is very interesting. So I'm just going to take you, I might have to edit this in the end. Hello, by the way, those who are watching. Oh, for God's sake, I keep doing this. So share screen and so I want to take you to this bit that about
making things happen, and they're controlling the narrative, and we want to align with that, and we want to believe in it. We want to identify with these characters. We spend our lives listening to their side of the story. We want to be next to power. We want to be next to the winner.
Woody Allen is someone who we accept as kind of this philosopher. And if we anything troubling about a person that sort of might have informed our values at all, we're not going to want to believe it.
I think so much of this is about like our willingness to not know the thing so that we don't have to deal with it when you're forced to see, when you're forced to know. It's so dispiriting. It's so hopeless. It's so uncomfortable. It's just easier, right, to opt out and to go back.
The movie, your movie,
very angry. There have been a lot of people that once they do research and they look into what lies.
It's existential to them that they grew up loving Woody Allen. You see it with a lot of fans of individuals who are accused of terrible and serious things in a credible way. About 2 hours.
So remember that people who are accused of serious things in a credible way. First person we go to is Michael Jackson. So what is a credible way is the first question I want to ask, because the only credible way that I know that people can be accused of something is in a court of law. And when they're accused of it, there are two sides. There's a defense and there's a prosecution. And that defense and the prosecution put forward their evidence and put forward their case to the best of their ability to persuade an impartial jury. If it isn't through that, then you haven't got a credible way. A magazine piece, a tweet on Twitter is not a credible allegation or a credible way in which we should therefore, abandon or divorce or, in any way change our tastes in artists or people that we admire because somebody has tweeted that they sexually abused them, or that they are a pedophile, or that they're racist, or that they're anything. The credible way to do any accusation is through a court of law. So this Michael Jackson thing is very interesting.
I think it's just all fabricated. It's lies. It makes me cross. It makes me very angry. There have been a lot of people that once they do research and they look into what the truth really was, they finally understand what happened to Michael Jackson.
Which again is absolutely true. And I'm going to take you to a video in a minute that shows this. That once you actually do an investigation, there was a recent documentary, Leaving Neverland, which, what's happened to Michael Jackson, in my opinion, could be considered comparable, if not worse, in terms of what the evidence actually is, in his case. Now, I feel Michael Jackson's a weird guy, and I think it's perfectly possible that he did abuse children, but they haven't proven it. And in fact, the accusers and the people who've come forward in that specific documentary, there's no credible allegation there. Their allegation is actually one of the most shockingly questionable uses of a documentary, probably much worse than this Woody Allen versus Farrow documentary, to be fair to it, this Woody Allen documentary. But here we go.
I think the public has a great deal of trouble believing that someone they like could be a sex offender. The public is very harsh towards sex offenders, as long as they're over there and unlikable.
Bill Cosby was my boyhood mentor. There was no one bigger.
Over a dozen women have come forward alleging that they've been raped by the legendary comic.
So watching this play out over the last few years for a lot of folks, it's very, very difficult.
the kind of attachment.
So here we go. So here's a man who, you know, for whatever issues I might have with this case, was actually convicted in a court of law. Now, there are many, many problems with this case, which I'm going to go into. But what I wanted to highlight here in this specific part of the documentary is that ultimately this documentary that was just a voyeuristic gaze into a broken family and nothing more, actually has now turned into, you know, so everything everything that it amounted to was in fact innuendo, suspicion, a witch hunt. But we can't leave behind the pathological racism in which this documentary, or in which the documentary makers Amy Ziering, Amy Hardy, and Kirby Dick often stew. This is a problem that happened with The Hunting Ground, another documentary of theirs. There is an issue that these people have with using cases, very, very controversial cases, that perhaps I don't know that they haven't investigated themselves or they haven't looked at themselves, involving black males and black celebrities, and putting them front and center of you know, as the faces, the poster boys of the Me Too and Time's Up movement. And this is a big problem I have with them. So let's just go to, I'm just going to go to share screen on this. So we'll deal with the Michael Jackson case first. So this is one of the accusers in the Michael Jackson case for leaving Neverland. And I've read into this case a lot more than I've read into Woody Allen and Michael Jackson a lot more than I have read into Bill Cosby. Bill Cosby, I get the feeling, I very much get the feeling that he's guilty, but it is not my place, because I feel he's guilty, to just you know, to convict you know, the man in the court of public opinion. But what I will say is that he was tried twice, and the first time he wasn't convicted. The second time, the trial is an absolute joke. What happened to him? I believe he's guilty. I do. I believe that there's some credible cases amongst the many who've accused him. Now, I'm not going to say that for definite, because I haven't looked into it extensively. But I will say this: there were things that happened in the second trial that were hugely prejudicial against Bill Cosby, and shouldn't have happened in a court of law. And therefore, I don't count the second trial as a fair and impartial trial. But we'll go to Michael Jackson.
And as a kind human being, and as a goal to try.
So this is one of the people who eventually ends up coming out and saying Michael Jackson abused them on a documentary, and then tried to sue Michael Jackson for $1 billion. But this is what he had to say about Michael Jackson previously.
Repeatedly, that nothing improper ever occurred. He would also go on to defend MJ in numerous interviews before and after Michael died.
Are you still friendly with Michael?
Yeah, we still talk every couple months, catch up.
You do, really?
Yeah.
Well, what's he like?
What's he like? He's a good guy.
He's a good guy? Nothing ever like that? No nonsense, no shenanigans?
Just had a wonderful relationship. I learned so much from him as an artist and as a kind human being. And it's my try and just continue as much as I can in my own little world, that legacy.
In 2011.
So this is, again, we see that these cases are a lot more complicated, and that's why they're best left to courts. When you see this, you don't see any of this stuff really anybody probing him about why he would say these kind of things and how he could say these things as a fully grown adult, and then come on after he'd been fired from some project, Michael Jackson tribute project, and then come back and say he wanted to collectively with another person sue Michael Jackson for $1 billion. And yet this documentary unthinkingly uses and this shows that for them an accusation is enough. So this documentary of Allen versus Farrow, its whole narrative is that an accusation is enough to convict. You don't need any further evidence. So they use people whose cases are known to have been controversial and not properly settled yet. So last one. Here we go. This is one of Bill Cosby's accusers. We're going to find out a little bit about her. This was the first person to ever accuse Bill Cosby of this, and it was very public. People knew about it. It was in papers. So she was the first to come out and accuse Bill Cosby. Now, several other women came forward and accused Bill Cosby, which is why I feel that maybe there's some credibility to these allegations. And without investigating it myself, on the balance of evidence that I do know, I would venture to believe that something potentially happen. But there's also a very, very good case to make that Bill Cosby was railroaded in the second trial, and that a lot of these women have been proven to be non-credible and to lie. And this is just one example. There are many more examples, but each one of them right? So just a couple of examples here. And I mean, I don't know, like, what to say about these documentary makers, if they're doing this on purpose, why they're doing this. They then go on to discuss, along with Bill Cosby and Michael Jackson, the case of Roman Polanski. Now, Roman Polanski is very, very different from Bill Cosby and Michael Jackson. Why? Because he admitted to sleeping with a 13-year-old. He admitted it. He went on the run. People in Hollywood kept doing films with him after he went on the run to Europe and stayed out there. This is a completely black and white case. Bill Cosby, now he's been convicted, so I'll at least give them that at least they've chosen somebody who was convicted, a black male who was convicted of a crime. So I'll give them that in this case. But Bill Cosby, if you're going to accuse somebody in a documentary, I don't care if they've been convicted and they're easy targets or not. It would be nice to do some research just to make sure that you're favorably portraying all sides of the case. Michael Jackson didn't even get convicted. So to associate them with a man who absolutely 100%, Roman Polanski that is, admits to doing the act with this 13-year-old, knowing full well that they were 13 years old, and his story lines up exactly with hers, is complete and utter travesty. And specifically to align also Woody Allen with that is ridiculous, from the point of view of Woody Allen, who has not admitted to doing any such thing. So make no mistake, the Mia Farrow family are no underdogs in this fight. Far from it. As much as I despise Woody Allen's callous actions with Sun Yi, it is in fact him and many other powerful men who are the underdogs in this, and I say powerful in quotation marks, who are the underdogs in this fight. Your experiences matter much more than, so I'm saying this to, I'm saying this to Dylan Farrow, who said that she feels that Woody Allen has made her feel like her experiences don't matter, and people who say that it didn't happen to her have made her feel like her experiences don't matter. Well, I say this to her, and maybe she isn't aware of this because of the incredible privilege she's born in. Her experiences very much do matter. They matter much more than most people's. That's why me, a person who's never met her or her father or any parties involved, is analyzing on YouTube what has happened between you and your family. And you will probably never know my name, even though I am also me myself. That's me, the Nerd Man. I am also a victim of child abuse, right? So it's telling that I myself, you're saying it doesn't matter, and your experience, you feel like you're powerless. Your experiences don't matter, and you can have any feeling you want. That's, I'm not going to tell you how you should feel, but the fact of the matter is that your experiences matter more than 99% of people on this planet, because you're able to get a 4-part documentary series about your experiences. Whereas I've been, I won't go into my abuse as a child, but it was actually pretty distressing to me for a long while. I'm now kind of over it. But I will never get this kind of documentary. I'll never be able to call my friend at the New York Times and be able to do an expose on the person who abused me. And, I'm fine with that. But please don't tell me that your experiences don't matter when clearly they do. You're able to get this done. The fact that you're able to get this done shows that your experiences are at a much more privileged level to the vast majority of peoples in the world. And lastly, I'd like to finish off just by saying, In fact, I don't even need this screen. I'd like to finish off just by saying the sum total of this is really that it's none of any of our businesses. None of us know whether Woody Allen did this or not. I'm not going to sit here and pretend and go and scour through evidence and scour through notes and whatever, because the fact of the matter is the appropriate way that this should have been investigated was taken off the table by the victim and the alleged victim and their family. Woody Allen didn't take the criminal charges off the table. He didn't stop this from going to a criminal, criminal or in fact civil trial. It was Dylan Farrow who did. Dylan Farrow and her lawyer, the prosecutors who'd done that. So the sum total of this whole documentary, as compelling as some of it was, is it's none of my business. So again, Dylan Farrow asked me, what is my favorite Woody Allen movie? Because when she was younger, something happened to her, or she claims something happened to her. So she challenges me to ask me what is my favorite Woody Allen movie after this. Well, I'll tell you, and I'm proud to say it's Love and Death and Zelig, because the reason I'm saying this is not because I would watch Woody Allen movies even if I thought he was abusing children, but rather because, or even if I knew he had abused children, but rather because I believe a man is innocent until he's proven guilty. So yes, favorite, I recommend it highly. You should go watch it now. Love and Death and Zelig if you've never seen it before. Thank you.